Good afternoon. Here today, we have a very special guest, Damien. He sits in the seat of honor, and he tells us what an ancient secret named Maxwell. Maxwell is an alien who was a mantis being, and those mantis beings are still abducting humans for experiments. Now, Damien's going to tell us about what he experienced when he was being the voice actor for the book that I wrote called A Conversation with Extraterrestrials. So stay tuned for a very mind-bending conversation about Damien talking about how he basically channeled an alien. This is Robin Alexis, and Damien is a voice actor. He's a holistic healing person and energy medicine practitioner. He creates jewelry, and he can be reached at interstate1111.com. And again, Damien is the voice of Maxwell in my audiobook, A Conversation with Extraterrestrials. And while recording for this audiobook, Maxwell paid Damien a visit. So I'm here today with my really cool co-host, Ken Sylvester. We are your hosts of the Believe Me movement. So buckle up your cosmic seatbelts as you listen to what Damien has to tell us about Maxwell and more. Are you ready, Ken?
Yes, Robin. We welcome you, Damien, and I'll hear Damien to tell us his story.
Hey, thank you, Ken. Thank you, Robin, for being able to join you here today and talk about these concepts and ideas and my experience. It's interesting how this all unfolded. What's funny is before saying yes to this project, I was walking one day here in Mount Shasta where I live, and we're getting a nice dusting of snow out there right now. I was walking, and I just happened to look on the ground, and I found a tuning fork. And which tuning forks aren't something that's abnormal to stumble upon here in Mount Shasta, I suppose, but this one was a frequency that I had never heard of before. It was 2200 hertz. So because I didn't know what that was good for, I started doing some searching on it. And one of the things that I found that 2200 hertz was good for was making connection with and communication with extraterrestrials.
Oh my God.
So it was interesting how that happened right when you contacted me about doing this second project. We had worked on another project together, your book, Raising Humanity, which for your listeners, if you haven't read or listened to that book on audio, I suggest checking it out. It's a beautiful rendition of a bunch of, not rendition, but collection of a lot of different stories. So that's a side note. But it was funny how I found that tuning fork right after you asked me to do this project. And when I searched for, and I knew what you were asking me, I was to be the voice of this Mantis being who was being the voice of the collective of Mantis being extraterrestrials that you had experienced in your early life and connections with when you started connecting with ETs, Robin. So for me, it was like confirmation. Okay, I'm being asked to voice this book, and at that point, I hadn't had a lot of interaction with ETs, so I remembered. I'm realizing there's more that's coming through as time goes on. But yeah, it was confirmation for me to say yes to this project, because I'm being asked to connect in with this being and voice this being, and then I find tools. So one of the things that I do, like you mentioned, is I make wire-wrapped jewelry. So what I did was I was guided to add a crystal to wire wrap a crystal onto the tuning fork, and to strike the tuning fork and place the crystal on my third eye. And
wow.
To allow that connection to take place with Maxwell. One of the things I did with your previous audiobook was, as an energy worker, and I also work in some shamanic realms. I'm initiated into a lineage of ancient Toltec technologies and wisdom. And so one of the things that I did was I activated those frequencies and technologies that I have, these different modalities, into the tuning fork through the crystal to create a connection between myself and Maxwell, to bring through his voice and to let his vibration use my vocal cords to bring through the recording his greater message. I did the same thing similarly. I didn't have that fork, and it wasn't my intent to connect with something off-world. But with your first book, I tapped in energetically to connect with the higher selves of the other writers whose stories I was voicing, and to allow their voice, their vibration, the higher vibration of the words that they wrote, the energy back of the words to come through in the recording. So that was my intent when I started doing that with this tuning fork adorned with the crystal and the wire-wrapped copper I was asked to do. And it was interesting how when I started speaking in Maxwell's voice, there was a certain shift I felt in my body. Like, I don't channel voices, I don't channel other beings, but that gave me insight into A, I have this ability to do this, and B, noticing the differences between my energy and the energy of this other being coming through. Another side note is, ever since I was a kid, I have been fascinated with mantises, with praying mantises.
Wow.
I remember there was a show I used to watch when I was a child, and I lived with my grandmother, called Mantis. It was some action adventure type show, but I've always had this connection with the mantis. And what's funny is people tell me I'm kind of on the thin side, and people tell me when they see me and the way I move or dance or do martial arts, they look at me and see a mantis, like this praying mantis type being. So I thought it was so funny and fitting, and that Maxwell was a mantis being. It's been a fun, enjoyable ride to not only voice Maxwell, but to feel that shift in presence within my own body, to invite in this conversation with him for the recording of your book, and to also know that, you know, the messages that being, that collective of beings brought through that transmission, through you in the writing of the book. I think it's important for our times and what is on the precipice of evolution for humanity.
That is absolutely stunning, all the way from your childhood experiences with the Mantis to people thinking you move and look a bit like that energy, and then finding, I mean, what are the odds that you would find
100%.
a tuning point? That's amazing. Wow. Ken, is there anything that you'd like to ask Damien?
Well, no, just a comment on when he was mentioning feeling guided. And Robin can tell you that this connection has been going on for a couple of months between her and I, where we seem to find the information at the time we need it, or it coincidentally happens to be something we're currently working on. And that's happened on a regular basis, where we just feel like we're being guided down this path.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Damon. Please, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say I agree. The more I pay attention and the less I allow the inner call to go to voicemail, as I say, the more guided I know that I am. And it's not that we're not always being guided, it's how well am I listening?
So how do you, Damien, discern that you're actually in touch with your own inner knowing, and you have that trust that you know that you know that you know that message is actually from your own essence?
Good question, Robin. For me, it's been a lot of trial and error, and listening to outside forces for most of my life. I've been a people pleaser for most of my life. So when I am guided by what other people want from me, or from what the world, society has deemed as the truth and what they want us to believe, life doesn't feel like it moves as smooth, and it brings more challenges, which can be good because they can be guideposts back to our own authentic knowing and truth, and what I call my inner GPS. Sometimes I use guiding presence of spirit. Sometimes I use GPS as the guiding presence of source. I use the word source and spirit interchangeably. So it's about bringing me back to my own inner guidance. And I've worked enough at this to know what a yes and a no feels like in my body, viscerally and somatically. And a big part of it is also in this Toltec lineage, we have a process called the place of power, which is made up of 3 separate exercises. So the Nawal, or the shaman in the lineage, would tell their party, their group, get into your place of power, and we drop in instantly. After, sometimes at the beginning it may take some time to get into that state, but I've done it enough to where when I know that I really need to pay attention, especially if something outside of me is trying to influence or guide me towards something away from my own knowing, I drop into my place of power, and that's been helpful for me along my journey.
Well, and it sounds like your ability to detect the difference between your frequency and Maxwell's is because you have practiced the art of knowing your own frequency and learning to manage your own energy, and learning to trust when you feel something to move in a certain way throughout your life. And so that's something I didn't know that, and again, for people who are listening, we're talking about an extraterrestrial named, who calls himself Maxwell, who I, as a child, had a dreadful extraterrestrial abduction experience with, but in adulthood, he explained to me what it was all about and what the benefits of it were, and I wrote a book called A Conversation with Extraterrestrials. And that being is the one that Damien was the voice for in the audio book. And so anyone who wants to communicate to extraterrestrials must learn the art of telepathy, because that's the only way they communicate, is telepathically. And so if you're going to learn telepathy, whether it's with an extraterrestrial or with someone else, the first thing you really need to do is identify and know and be capable of discerning, like what Damien's just saying, his own knowing and how to listen to it. And it's different for each person. Like for me, if I get something that's really true, I get what I call God bumps. I get little like goosebumps on my forearms. And I don't, Damien, how is it that you feel when you feel something is true?
I don't sense it with the goosebumps or the God bumps. There is times when those come through, and that might happen for me when I'm not cognitively trying to discern a yes or a no, or truth or an untruth. It may be at times where something pops up, and then it's like my mind isn't focused on that specific question or that thought, but my body comes into the presence of this knowing. And so it's like my body has to do something to catch the attention of my mind to go, hey, pay attention to this.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Our bodies don't lie, and all of us have a certain way that our bodies speak. How about you, Ken? I know you're really good at this, but I have never actually asked you how it is that you are. I mean, you're so capable. You tell me things all the time that kind of blow my mind about how you manage your own energy, and I'm just taken aback with the clarity of it. But is that something you do organically, or is that something that you taught yourself to do, Ken?
Well, I'm not at the level of consciousness that you and Damien are at. This is all new to me, and it seemed to happen more intense as I started writing this book. And when I get channeling to me, I have a pen and paper always handy. And just the other night, when I told you that I seemed to be getting channeling regarding why the ETs were mad at us and what they thought, and just words just seem to spill out, and I just write them down without thinking about them at the moment, and then, try to catch up. And I'm still not able to discern whether this is my intuition, whether it's any psychic ability, or whether I've just got channeled by this specific alien group, and but have not had the presence to be as mindful as you two are of it. But I am becoming more aware of it as it happens.
And I think as each of us become more aware of our own style of knowing that we know something, and like what Damien was saying, it's our inner GPS, and if we don't pay attention to it, it is going to create more havoc in our lives rather than smooth sailing. It is also going to give us the opportunity to become more aware of discerning when other life forms are interacting with us. And I like to say that if someone is having a really benevolent experience with an extraterrestrial, alien, space brother, space sister, whatever terminology people want to use, if you feel like this really heartwarming experience, well then obviously that's a beautiful experience. But if, like sometimes, since I've lived in Mount Shasta, I will wake up in the middle of the night and I will see and feel this like thing that tries to get into me, and I'll just be screaming and screaming and screaming because I can't fight it off by myself, and my husband will come running downstairs, and then it just seems to scare the thing off. Last week I had a guy come and close a vortex that was in my bedroom, and he said that it was so open anything could come in, which is certainly what I was experiencing. I'm extremely psychic, channel all kinds of stuff, but bad stuff was getting in, and it was really creeping me out. But since he's been here, it's been calm. But basically what I want to share with people, how important it is, the teachings that we're having that are coming through with Damien being on the show are broader than I anticipated, because the core of our ability to function as humans and be safe, and also ultimately have to interact with extraterrestrials, because they are here, and it's going to be, whatever the word is, disclosed. And, we're going to have to figure out, like, are they one that you want to have something to do with, or are they one you don't? In this case, Damien obviously was guided to be the voice of Maxwell, a Mantis being, in my book, A Conversation with Extraterrestrials. And even though I was terrified as a child through that abduction experience, which you can listen to when you get the audiobook, I don't want to talk about it right now. In the end, I will say that they were experimenting on my eyes. And I was told by Maxwell, someday when you become an adult, you're going to have good eyesight. And that has happened to me. I used to wear Coke bottle glasses. I was almost blind in one eye. And now, every year I've been going back to the local people here in Wairika, and they're like, you got 20/20 vision. You got great eyesight. So I was able to put my glasses down. And even telling that story, I get sort of choked up, because if you're a person out there who you have to fumble around for your glasses to see stuff in the morning or whatever you got to do, man, eyesight is really a fun thing to have. So there was a benefit from the experience. And so I thought it was brave of you, Damien, to work with him, because I'm a little skeptical of the dude. And Ken and I have Ken talked to him, and I don't know if Ken's going to talk about it, but Ken was talking to him, and at one point we just stopped the conversation. So, Ken, do you want to talk about your experience with Maxwell, or just jump onto another subject?
Yeah, I just have one comment. I think he's a bit sneaky, too,
because
he's been trying to get back on this show, and we've been avoiding him, and then now he found a way to get his voice on here.
Yeah, but that's why I felt so safe with Damien. I mentioned it before we actually started recording, because Damien has a very high vibrational frequency. I was telling Ken that, most of my communication with Damien has been via texting. And I met him once downtown, and I was so overwhelmed with your purity, Damien. I don't even know if you realized it, but I talked to you for like 10 minutes and found out where I could get jewelry that you handcraft. And I sort of moved away from you because you're such a high frequency. And so I knew if anybody could handle Maxwell, it would be you. And you're telling us exactly how you did it.
Yeah, you make a great point, Robin. And, speaking to that, learning the differentiation between myself and this being, I think one of the greatest gifts that I've been given in terms of being able to do that is the fact that I've been very empathic all of my life, and I pick up on other people's feelings. And as a kid and into my adulthood, before I started consciously walking a spiritual path, I took on other people's energies. I allowed so much in, and it was difficult to know where my energy ended and where somebody else's, those lines would blend, and I would feel other people's pain, sorrows, and take it on as my own. And over time, I've learned to protect my field. And in terms of my auric field, my energy field, I have learned to create protection around me that will only allow in what I say yes to. So that therein lies another aspect of these communications with a being that is either off-world or multidimensional, or even connecting in with nature and allowing ourselves to open up to communication with something else that is maybe not a verbal, where there's no language involved, it's just vibration. Mm-hmm. And that is our sovereignty, and to make the choice to only allow in a connection that's benevolent. Because I've seen ships on the mountain. If you're around Mount Shasta a lot, you're going to see ships, just like one of your viewers on a previous episode. She was from Sedona, and she was speaking to. You're going to see them. So it's the same here with Mount Shasta, as I'm sure you have experienced.
Yes.
I remember being up on the mountain once, and I just instantly wanted to try to connect in with this ship that I saw, and I was there with somebody else, and she was seeing the same exact ship. We were like, okay, you're seeing this? Okay, I'm seeing this. And she said something that shifted the way I try to connect in, and because I originally wanted to connect in, let's make a connection, and she said something like, I only give, consent to connecting in if you are benevolent. And I think that is very important. If, the same way we would not want somebody in our home or who is not a benevolent being, we wouldn't want to open up our energy field to a being who was not going to be benevolent as well.
And that is exactly about what I've discovered with what I would discern, to make it very simple, good ETs, bad ETs. Bad ETs don't care about your free will. They will violate you and override your free will and do whatever they want to you until you realize that something's going on and you make the decision to stop it. Because once you do that, then they really can't do it anymore. But if they know that you don't know, they'll violate you because you're innocent.
Right.
But once you realize the importance of free will, which is the first universal law, right? Thy will be done through me now. Connect your will with what is the most benevolent for you. And you spoke about being empathic, and you had previously said, when you were younger, you were a people pleaser, which those two things go hand in hand for children until they learn exactly what you said, to be sovereign. But I think that when we come in as empaths and we develop that survival skill of pleasing personality, I think, for myself anyway, I think it's important not to toss it out altogether, but to rather put it in your psychic toolkit so that if it serves you to do that in a situation, you do it. But if it doesn't, you don't do it. For me, I would be hardwired that either something was one way or the other, and it's taken me a lot of decades to figure out, put things you don't want to use in a toolkit, and then if you have to use it for some sort of survival reason, you've got it, which is, obviously what we did as children. We did that to survive, and then we became adults and sovereign, and we can choose what we want. But what you mentioned about only if it's benevolent, free will, anyone who's listening to this show, just say it right now. I only allow what is in alignment with my free will that's benevolent for me to be experienced, and understand that you're going to have to become aware of your own energy before you're going to realize that something else is actually in your energy field. And so you want to develop understanding your own frequency, managing your own energy, protecting your own energy, and discerning what you will and will not let around you, whether it's an ET or anything else. So lots of insights coming through you, Damien, today. Ken, what would you like to share?
Going back to my experience with Maxwell, just before we ended the conversation, we got on what I felt was a negative kind of thing where he was talking about he can do shape-shifting and basically do whatever he wants, and how he mentioned then, humans to them are just guinea pigs.
Mm-hmm, he did.
And that kind of put me off, and that's why I've resisted when you said, let's try and talk with him again, because I didn't feel he was totally benevolent.
Well,
or he could be both.
That's a good point. Talk to that a little bit.
Well, I guess there's good and bad in all of us, and the same probably exists with ETs, I would imagine, too.
Wow, what an insight. What do you think of that, Damien?
Yeah, I totally agree with Ken there. When you were speaking to that, it made me think of, that whole line, guinea pigs, using humans as guinea pigs, and that's because humans, Maxwell, I feel like Maxwell is speaking in a way that we humans can understand, and that whole thing has come about because humans have scientifically studied the way their chemical affect other beings, and one of those beings that they use is a guinea pig. So, would we call those scientists who are using guinea pigs, rabbits, rats, whatever, bad humans? Some people may, PETA may say, yeah, they're bad humans. Some people who are, this scientific studies have created beautiful medicines that have saved lives. Some people may say, oh no, they're good humans. And I've heard it once said, there's no such thing as good, there's no such thing as bad, there's just popular opinion. I don't know, somewhere in between is the truth, and we live in a world, in a universe that is not either or, it's yes and. So, like the way one of my teachers, the shamanic teachers in the lineage, the Toltec lineage I'm in, if I were to ask, well, are they good or are they bad? They would tell me, yes.
Wow, and that's what Ken just said. That's really cool. What wisdom. Ken, did you want to share something else?
Yeah, those people that Damien's currently referring to, these people are doing experiments for mankind, trying to improve mankind. And I don't believe the same is true with our friend.
Well, I remember what he said, Ken. He said that he was trying to improve the human bodysuit so that they could come in and inhabit them without having the health problems. And that's
right.
Pretty much when you hung up on him.
Right.
So,
well, he's saying, he just wants to use our bodies for his own purpose.
Yeah.
Well, another thought.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you please.
I was going to say there's another school of thought is that these ET beings are future versions of humanity, like highly evolved versions of humanity who have come back to make tweaks, I guess, on themselves. So I'm not saying that that's what I believe, but if that were the case, were are they being benevolent toward what would be beneficial for the long-term evolution of the human being?
Well, I remember when we were having a conversation with Maxwell that we recorded, but I doubt we'll ever release. He said that there were so many different ET groups that didn't even know that the others were on the planet, right? Like there's some here doing experiments, and then some know about each other and they're fighting each other and blah, blah, blah. So maybe that is true, but that happens to be what Maxwell said. As we've been speaking, probably because we're going to move towards the end of the show, I'm going to ask Ken if he has something else to say, but I do want to tell you two, and anyone listening, that the queen of the Mantis beings has come, and she is here, and what she is saying is the problem with the Mantis beings that she's the queen of is that they observe human behavior, and so that's how they've been acting. It's how humans have been acting. And she said she has come to realize that in order for humanity or any of these other species interacting with humanity to survive, is we can't be power over. We need to be power with. We can't be for the love of power. We have to be for the power of love. And so she's actually showing me an image of, what some people would call Yeshua, because that, she's letting me know that is a expression of agape love. And so she, as the head of the Mantis beings, has learned that and now is going to be re-instructing her Mantis family, if you will, to be interacting with humanity in a different way, because she knows that the ones who survive are the ones who are, as you were saying, Damien, are aware of their energy, aware of what we're interacting with, we're aware of free will, and we're all about agape love. So there you have it. We heard from the queen of the Mantises, and she says she loves you, Damien.
Well,
can you feel that at all when she says that?
I get the tickles in my body.
Yeah.
She
says you're not a Mantis, but you have offered to work with them to educate them, and that's why you were selected to be the voice of Maxwell, and why you're on the show today is to shape-shift the frequency of the entire collective of the Mantises, which is exactly what you said at the beginning of the show, that you got that tuning fork and you put the crystal on it and put it up to your forehead so that you could be the voice of Maxwell as the expression of the Mantis collective. And here she's coming in and saying the same thing. So I'm in awe of that.
That's beautiful. And it also goes to show that more confirmation for me, which, things that I left out about my interaction. I work with Yeshua a lot, and he came through and he saved my life. He's saved my life multiple times, but the day that I realized I was on a spiritual path, I used to say when I started my spiritual path, but I realized that it started eons ago. But I do a lot of work with him, and he has come through in the energy work that I do, and he's given me some other modalities that I just call the Christ light, and I work with this in my healing sessions and distance work that I do with people, as well as other ways. One of the ways that I use this Christ light is when I take on other people's energies. Maybe I've opened up a portal through my own energy field to tap in and be present with someone, and something got left behind like in a session, or if I'm just holding space for someone, or just in public for that matter. And I take something on, or I leave parts or something of myself has been taken against my will, or where I just left it behind. When I call these energies back to me, or I send energies back to whence they came from, or if I'm connecting in with Maxwell, like I said, yes, I want to claim my sovereignty and only allow in benevolence, but I also filter what I'm receiving and what I'm sending through the filter of the Christ light to protect me.
Absolutely amazing that you hadn't said that, but it came up through the Queen of the Mantis beings, and now you're sharing that. Thank you. That's a very vulnerable thing for you to share. Ken, is there anything you'd like to add?
I'd like to ask further questions about who he's currently talking about. I have not heard of the being, and I wonder if most of our listeners are. Is this a spiritual figure you're talking about, Damien? And could you say his name again?
Yeshua. So many people know Yeshua as Jesus from the Bible.
Okay.
But in truth, back in those times, there was no such thing as a J. So the way we would say Jesus, or in the Spanish, Jesus, that letter was not even in the lexicon of the Hebrew language back when he was alive. His name, as I understand, is Yeshua. I've also heard Yeshua. Like his father before him was said to be Joseph. A more accurate representation would be Yosef. So Yeshua is the Jesus from the Bible.
Okay.
But he's also the living, breathing being of those teachings, which I don't feel are necessarily, he isn't represented well in the Bible and some of the works that have, and well, we're getting into some political and religious stuff, which is not where I intended to go with this, but
that's okay. Let's just lay that down.
He's the Jesus from the Bible. That's Yeshua.
Okay. Thank you.
Ken, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No. This is very interesting, and Damien's well versed, and I can feel it myself.
He is very Christ-like. That's how I felt when I met him, and I wasn't going to say that, but man, you really carry that frequency. And I will say that Ken and I were told that we were supposed to do this show to anchor in the dimension of agape love, which is Yeshua's teaching. So I think the three of us can, and anyone listening to this, can certainly feel the joy of the vibration that is meant to be shared. And the Queen of the Mantis beings is saying over and out. So I want to thank you, Damien. You can be reached at interstate1111.com. And for anyone listening, he is a voice actor. He's fantastic, as you can tell. He's a holistic healing practitioner and energy medicine practitioner, and he makes extraordinarily beautiful, one-of-a-kind jewelry. And again, he can be reached at interstate1111.com. So any guests who sit in the seat of honor on the Believe Me Movement podcast will be sharing with us their very personal experiences of either seeing a UFO, being abducted, or any paranormal experience that they're trying to make sense of. Or if anyone has a pet with health issues, we have a Dr. Nels who's going to be joining our show. So if you want to come on our show, we'd love to have you. We just ask you to stay open-minded And remember that this show is an experience, not an explanation. So, and what are we? Of course, we're a podcast, and we offer a relaxed and safe space for those of you courageous enough to share your profound and sometimes befuddling experiences as a live guest on our podcast. So if you're ready to be a guest, you want to come on the show, even if you want to talk about your pet that's got a problem or you've seen ETs, whatever it is, you're ready to share it, email me at spiritladyrobin@gmail.com, spiritladyrobin@gmail.com, and I will put you on the wait list and get you on the show. And Ken and I are the hosts. Ken is the best-selling author of his book, We're Not Alone, and Here's the Proof. And the book we've been talking about today, that Damien is the voice of the extraterrestrial Maxwell, is the book called A Conversation with Extraterrestrials. So why don't you go ahead and just pick up that audio version and listen to it right after the show. Go to Amazon and search for those two books. And remember, the Believe Me Movement podcast is brought to you by RobinAlexis.com. That's RobinAlexis.com. Over and out.
Over and out.